Hello everyone, I am live again. We are talking about ASP.NET Core stuff. Welcome to another video by me. If you are watching live, do shout up in the chat and we'll say hello. If you're not watching live, then shout up in the comments, I guess, and say hello. Right, okay, so when we last did this on a Saturday, which was, what, like 2 days ago? And today is the 1st of February, so the 30th of Jan. We've been working on some setting up a project. Now, in the intervening time, let me switch over to the other screen. In the intervening time, I've actually gone through and updated some stuff. I've actually pushed it out to GitHub. I took the code that I'd written, added a bunch of README stuff, code of conduct, issue templates, stuff like that. I pushed it out to GitHub, and you should all now be able to do pull requests if you really wanted, but you should also be able to pull the code down and give it a try if you wanted. So that's pretty cool, right? I do apologize if you hear any clicking. It's because I tell you what, no, I can't take it out. The end of the stylus for the pen, the end of the stylus for the tablet that I use, clicks open and clicks closed. I'm going to make an effort whilst I'm holding it to not click it, because that is the bane of the editor, the bane of the life of my podcast editor. So let's put that over there. Can't use it now. Okay, right, okay. So if you head over to github.com/progman/book API, then you'll be able to see the actual code that I wrote last time, that we wrote last time, that we were experimenting with. I've also added a README with a vague, not really complete at all, not a real roadmap. I'm wearing a bandana, by the way, because my head is very hairless, and so it's quite shiny, and I didn't want the glare. So we've written this. I've created some issues, which I'll go into in a minute. Importantly, I've created a code of conduct. This wasn't in any way... this isn't required for any bad reason at all. This helps all of the contributors, anyone watching these videos, anyone interacting live, to know that they are protected under a code of conduct and what to do, the behaviors that are expected, and what to do should you suspect someone is not acting within the best behavior. And the best way to please do read through this. This is taken from the Contributor Covenant, which is an open source code of conduct, and this is version 2, at the time of recording the latest version. If you do have any problems with any member of the community, you can get in touch via a Twitter direct message to either of my main Twitter accounts. I am going to in the future see if I can get a moderator to sit with us, because I'm using Linux, so I don't get access to Streamlabs, so I can't actually click and ban people if they do something horrible, or remove messages if they paste something nasty. So I can't do that at the moment, but it's something I'm working towards. So thank you ever so much, everyone, for doing that. Please do read through the code of conduct. There's nothing horrible in there. It's just basically be nice to each other, right? But yes, we also have a contributions guide, so if you want to make a contribution, please do. Please, 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 if you're afraid of anything, just please ask. If you're not sure, please just ask. Raise an issue with a question, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, and then we'll discuss it in the open on there. Or we can discuss it in the chat, and then I will then try and make I'll then go and create an issue with the basic idea from the chat. Anyway, that's me waffling on again. So if you're new to GitHub, then that's also cool. GitHub is a way of utilizing distributed version control and source control, which is amazing, which means that although the code is on my computer, it's also on GitHub's servers, plural, and that way if I mess it up, I can just pull the code again and we're good to go. And then when I make a change, I can push the code up, and then everyone can get access to that code. If you're not sure on source control, we can do a video on source control if you like. It's a big topic, so I don't want to just sort of gloss over it really quickly. But if you do go to github.com/progman/book API, I'll put the link somewhere useful. Maybe I'll tweet it out later. If you head over there, you can see this as it stands now. Now, I've created a number of issues based on an API specification that I've written. So if we go to the API specification, you can see that there's a lot of stuff here, but we need to have a get for one book. If you remember, we're building an API for a fictional book search system. I don't want to say search engine, but you know what I mean. And so we've got to be able to get a book by an ID. We've got to get a page of books, post a new book into storage, update a book via the put HTTP verb, and delete one. And what I've done is I've actually gone through and written out some steps for what we're going to do. And we can go back through this in a moment, and we totally should. But this is just to show you that this is here, and this will grow as we're adding and creating new stuff. We may end up creating an authors endpoint, so we can grab the authors that are in the system. Maybe we'll do a genres, I'm not sure, but so far the specification is create books, right? And again, we've got a vague roadmap here of some things we want to do. So we want to be able to get a single book record, and that's issue 1. That's what we're going to be tackling today. And you can see here, hopefully you can read this, it's big enough text, that what we want to do is we want to be able to send a GET request with a GUID and return that book, or return not found if we can't find that book. And we'll build this up using test-driven development. We'll do unit tests. We don't have a database storage technology yet because we're leaving that decision till later, until we need to actually write changes to that database. And so what we'll do is we'll do that maybe video 3, video 4. But what we've done here, what I've decided to do here is I've decided to create something that the issue template that we have, if I go to new issue, oh, I need to create a username. I'm not logged in as myself, but anyway, when you create an issue, you'll be given a template that matches kind of like this, with a description field. You say what the feature request needs to be. Maybe if you can provide a high level solution, so no details, just like maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. Any considerations that we need to think of whilst we're working on it, and the actual requirements that need to be ticked off in order to sort of pass this thing, right? And I'm not signed in, but that's because I'm inside of a private browser, but that's fine. And what we'll do is we will work on this today. And then once we've done that, we'll create some GitHub Actions, which is a great way of leveraging that sort of DevOps CI/CD pipeline to actually run the tests every time that we commit, which is wonderful, right? So we'll work on this in a moment, but I'm sure there's something else I wanted to show you. Yes. So the way that I've laid this out so far is that we have a documentation folder with a specification of sorts. The UI spec is completely empty at the moment because I haven't written it. Sometimes it works out like this, sometimes it doesn't in real life. But the API spec is that document that we were reading through. So in order to complete issue 1, we need to create this section here. In order to create that section there, we will need to read through both the default response codes that all API endpoints should return and the example request for a get a single book. Okay, and we'll actually find we're 90% of the way there on this one, and so we won't really have to do a huge amount. I also have a bit of a surprise for when we finish the work. It's a bit kitschy and a bit silly, but it's related to a tweet that is in this tab here. And if you're interested, we can totally look into that in a moment. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to refamiliarize ourselves with the code. So let's just drag Rider over here. I spent some time off stream actually fixing my installation of Rider, and now it works. It's the latest version as of today. If I go to About, you can see it's licensed to me, and it's due to run out at the end of this year, and it's running on OpenJDK 64-bit and it leverages the .NET Core system installed. This system does have, if I can go to here and go .NET version, whoops, nope, that's it, it's dash version. There we go, you can see I'm running version 5.0. You can see if I do list SDKs, you can see that I'm listing some SDKs there, and I've got version 2, 3, and 5. Because I've not pinned this repo, it will be using version 5, but we can pin it later if we need to. I'm just going to hide that for now. You can see here that Rider is wonderful in that it's opened and rendered that readme.md file for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and finish working on issue 1. I don't think that's going to work. It is going to work, but it's going to load in another window, but that's fine. Anyway, where were we? Ah, yes. I think I closed that browser. That's a real shame. Let me just really quickly set something up here, because what I like to do is I like to have some sort of study/work music playing in the background, and I'll shove that off to another desktop so then I can't see it. You didn't see any of that. That was happening on the other screen, and I like to have that music playing just because it helps me concentrate. Now, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at issue number 1, and issue number 1 we said was, if we scroll back up here and pull up the issues, I'll keep this here because that's kind of useful. Issue number 1, get a book by its ID. Now, before we actually start working on it, I want to talk a little bit about Git and the way that branching strategies work, or rather the branching strategy that I'm going to hope to use in this application. Hopefully you'll be able to see and read and grok, where are we? We're over here. The RM view window there. This is where I can draw on my tablet that I have in front of me, and it will actually show up on screen. So hopefully we'll be able, hopefully we'll be able to use that. So with Git and source control, you can have one trunk of history. I'll show you that visually in a moment. That kind of looks like this. So each of the circles in this diagram are commits that have happened to the repository. So this is, and I apologize ahead of time for let me rewrite that. Each of these is a commit against the source control, and this is time. So as we go from left to right, we're adding more commits to the repository, making changes to files, adding new files, creating code, making functionality, that kind of thing. And that's great, because that means that if we get to here and we find that there is a bug, we can literally rewind to that point and say, does the bug still exist? Yes. Okay, we'll rewind to this point. Does the bug still exist? No. And then we can do what's called a diff. We can take all of the changes from here and all of the changes from here and compare them. And that way we can say, what is the difference between these 2 points in time? Which is wonderful. Now, I prefer to do things slightly differently, especially if I'm working on discrete features, entire features, entire blocks of functionality. Instead of having one long line of a sort of single unbroken line of development, I like to work, because that's sometimes this is called trunk based. It's not always called this, and some people do trunk based differently. This is how I have seen trunk based in the past. I like to do feature based. So instead of it going all the way across left to right or right to left, whichever, or top to bottom, however you want to orientate this to get it understood in your head, I like to go, so this will be a branch called main, M-A-I-N, main, and we've got a commit there, we've got another commit there. These circles represent the commits that I've been making recently, with the README and the base, the initial code base. And then what we do is at this point we branch off. We take a copy of everything that's been going on so far and create a branch. Now a branch is like a separate copy of everything but stored in the same place. So we'll take, and we usually do this kind of thing because it's a tree structure, and these are commits against this new branch. So this might be let's call it number 1. No, let's call it 3, 4. Let's call this feature get book. Right now, these are. Oh, let me redo that because my handwriting is very small and terrible. So let's erase that. Do all of that again. So this might be feature, and then I usually put a // but you can put it however you want. Get GetBook. So this branch here, right? It's really cool I can do that. This branch here is to do with feature GetBook, right? And these are commits, and this is a commit. Anything committed in this branch, let me just shade that in correctly. There we go. Anything committed in this branch will not affect anything in this branch until we do what's called a merge, which is where we take all of these changes, and copy them back into this branch, which is wonderful. So we can make 1,000,001 changes here, or rather maybe just 3 or 4, and then we say merge this back into here, and that will be a commit where we've merged, and we can carry on. The great thing about this is that if there is an issue found somewhere in here, we can make changes along the way without actually affecting any of the work that goes on here. So let's say there's a bug found, and somebody comes along and goes, oh, I found this bug and I fixed it. It doesn't necessarily affect this work. If we were doing this kind of work, where I start working on a feature here, and before I commit it, someone commits a bug fix, which affects the way that I'm doing the work, I then have to pull all of the changes again and do a merge, then figure out why my code doesn't work, and then figure it out, and it stops me from actually achieving the goal of getting the work done. And so what I can do is, by using these branches, I can continue to work on the thing that I need to work on, and only when I'm ready to commit it back to main, when I'm ready to put it back into that master place, that single, I don't like to use the word master, but you know, when I'm able to, when I want to then take all of these changes and splat them over here, I've already done the work. I've produced. And so my next job is then to work on merging any of these fixes into this branch. So then I've still produced, I just need to sort of fix everything. And then when we're back here and everything is adopted and everything's hunky-dory and nice and lovely, what we'll do is we'll continue on and maybe make another branch for some other feature. Let's put some other feature. And then you start again. And this way you can have multiple people working on multiple different features at the same time. And what you do is you come to this point here and you make a decision. You say, did this work? Did this feature GetBook work? Brilliant. Are we happy with it? Excellent. Then at this point, you might decide to delete. Oh, I've misspelled something. Let's try again. Delete the feature GetBook branch. And the reason that you might decide to delete that is because this has now served its purpose and all of the changes have been merged in here, so we don't actually need this. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do. And to do that, we need to create a branch. Now, what we do is, let's do that first before we start working on anything. Sort of discuss and discover how we're going to do that. So let's go over here. And first thing we need to do, sometimes I like to work in the command line and sometimes I'll open an app to do Git. If I get stuck, I'll open an app. Otherwise, I'll work in the command line just because it's kind of, you don't have to know these. First of all, you don't ever have to work in the command line if you are not comfortable doing it. That's not a problem. If there's some visual app that's easier, use the visual app because it's whatever's about making you more productive. If you want to then go and learn the command line and I was going to say CLI then, which is short for command line interface. If you want to go and learn that CLI, that command line, then absolutely please do. And then you can make the decision as to whether you think you're better with the UI or the CLI, the app or the command line. And you go from there, right? Whatever works for you. So anyway, first thing we need to do is we need to ask Git, what is the status of this repo? So I'm going to say Git status. Whoops, except I'm going to spell it correctly. There we go, Git status. It says that the current branch that I'm on, which is called main, is up to date with origin main. Now origin main is the branch that's over here in GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Git, I think I should be able to do Git b feature, whoops, GetBook by ID. I think this will work. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out. Nope, it doesn't like that. Okay, what about if I do git checkout? Will that do it? Did not match. Oh, bother. Is it git branch? See, this is why it's always a good idea. Just try it out. Aha! Git status. Did we create a branch? No, we didn't. Tell you what we'll do. We'll look at git create branch. Because sometimes we have to ask for help, right? I don't know all the answers. Never be upset. Checkout -b. There we go. Okay, never be upset and never be at all worried about asking for help. And if you have to ask the internet for help, then you have to ask the internet for help. In fact, Scott Hanselman tweeted out just a few hours ago, don't ever be upset about having to look things up. He says in his tweet, I'll see if I can find it later on, he says in his tweet that he's been doing this for 30 years and still looks things up. Because we all look things up, right? We can't all hold everything in our heads all at once. So let's go back here. So I was almost right. When I did git checkout, I was almost right. I missed the -b. So let's do that. Git checkout branch feature get by ID. Oh, bother. Let's have a look. Git status. It already exists, does it? Okay, let's do git branch. Maybe because I created it with the wrong command. Book by ID. It already exists. Maybe I need to do checkout without the B then. I think maybe I've broken it already. Switch to branch. There we go. Git status. Excuse me. So we are now on a branch called feature GetBook by ID. I'm just worried that I've mistyped that then, but it took me a moment and I've got it. Okay, so this allows us to work outside of main, so that if someone, whilst we're doing this, makes changes to that main branch, we don't have to worry because those things are, that's happening elsewhere. We will have to worry about it when we come to merge our changes back in, but that's not a huge problem. So we're in this branch. So let's go have a look at Rider and see what it thinks. So if you can see, it's a bit small, I do apologize, but it says feature GetBook by ID. Excellent. What we really should have done is we should have run this ahead of time to actually make sure it still works. So let's change this to Firefox because that's the browser that I'm using. We're going to boot into the Swagger endpoint and see what happens. Let's run this. I like to leave the README open sometimes because it kind of helps, right? I am looking at maybe putting some background music into this whilst we're doing this because it could be useful. Let's go advanced. So it's my local machine. So what's happening here, right? Before we continue, what's happening here is we've told Rider start this application on the HTTPS endpoint, right? But because it's a development, it's working using the development certificate. It's not using a signed certificate. So this is Firefox telling us, yo, watch out. You've gone to a website and it doesn't have a valid HTTPS certificate. If this is a real website, you could be in danger. And it's absolutely true. If you ever get this warning, don't do what I'm about to do. I know that this website is safe because I'm working on it locally. If you hit this in real life, you go to, I don't know, you go to Google, you go to PayPal, you go to the BBC, wherever, and you see this warning, don't do what I'm about to do. So I clicked advanced, and then I said accept the risk. That's putting the risk on me. I know that if I'm visiting a real website, it could be that they're trying to steal information from me, credit cards, passwords. But I'm using local code that I've built, so I'm okay with this. So I accept the risk. Okay. So we should get a Swagger endpoint, but we're not getting it. I wonder why. What have I done? I wonder if I've broken it. Ah, we're in production, that's why. Yes. So the reason for this, whoops, is I don't know whether you'll remember. I tried to point out during the previous stream that so there's a lot of things going on. Over here we've got hosting environment production. We are running in production mode. And over here we've got if we are in development, give me Swagger. Now I did this last time to show that you can control things like this. So I am going to go properties, I'm going to go launch settings, and I'm going to set this back to run in development mode, close that, and we'll restart it, and we'll magically get Swagger working again. Now if we wait a moment whilst it starts, there we go, Swagger is working. So let's have a look, see what we've got. We've got GetBook API, HTTP get API book. Let's try this out and execute it. We always get the same data back. We need to change that so that there's two things that we need to do. If we have a look on GitHub, where are we? Here we are. We need to change this so that A, we're passing a GUID in as part of the path, excuse me, and B, we're returning something that kind of looks like this. That's not so bad. We can do this really quickly in two ways, but what we'll actually do is we will we'll start building it up with some tests. Now, when we last did this a few days ago, I couldn't add the tests because everything was broken, because I was using an old version of Rider, but now we're using a much later version. So I'm going to add a new project to the tests area. This is a virtual folder that doesn't really exist on disk. It just exists within the solution, which makes it easier within Rider, Visual Studio, that kind of thing, to actually organize code. I'm just going to straighten this out because it's annoying me that my eyebrow is sticking up. I can't really control that, folks. I do apologize. So this is going to be the book api.tests. Let me explain why it's going to be called that. So this is going to be the test project for book API. So I'm going to call it book api.tests because it's the tests for that CS project. It's just the way that I like to roll. I'm going to put it into the tests folder, which doesn't exist, so I'm going to go and create it. So can I create a folder from here? I can. Tests. I'm going to put it into that folder, so then it'll be right next to it. We're going to do .NET 5, we're going to do XUnit, and we're going to say go create that thing. It goes and does its thing. It then says, hey, do you want to add these files to Git? Not quite yet, because we're not quite ready yet. So if we double check in our folder, this folder directory here is the real one on disk, and this is sort of a virtual one, and this one now matches the layout. I like to keep them in sync, because then when you're looking at, when you're inside of an IDE and you need to find the file, you know exactly where to go because it matches, right? It's a little bit more effort, but there you go. So I'm going to go book, we're going to call this GetBook tests. GetBook controller tests. Controller tests. Now sometimes, let me make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Sometimes doing this kind of thing makes it, you end up with tests that have really verbose names, right? And let's just call this book controllers. Yeah, okay. You sometimes end up with things that have really verbose names, but I'm okay with that because I'd rather be verbose than not verbose enough. It's the same thing with logging, right? I'd rather have way too much logging than not enough. The problem is then that you end up working with hundreds and thousands of lines of logs. So what do we want to do? We want to make sure, let's close this, that our controller, let's have a look, that our get controller returns something, right? So we want to say that we've already written the code, but we wouldn't usually do this. We're gonna catch up with ourselves. We're gonna say that the get controller should return not found when we can't find a book in the service. Now all of this is going to change in a minute because we need to pass a GUID into here, which we will do in a moment, right? So we're going to go get should return, no, we'll do get returns. Get returns. Now I like to put underscores in because you'll see why in a moment, but when you open up a thing called the Test Explorer, you can see the names. You can almost forget that the underscores are there, just because you can't do that in a method name because it's not valid C#, right? So get returns not found when, I like to do this, it's like method name returns thing it returns when supplied book cannot, requested not supplied. Let's try this again. Requested book can't, yes, I've spelled it wrong, be found. So requested book cannot be found, and that way I'm going to run the tests. It's not asserting anything, so it won't fail, which is wonderful. But you can see here, and I'm sorry about the small text, get returns not found when request book cannot be found. Excellent. We've already got 3% unit test coverage, but that's because it's showing us the test coverage for the test project. So little pro tip here is you can actually, if you're inside of Rider, you can stop it from doing this. And you do this by going to, is it? Oh dear, settings, here we go. So in here, we can say don't analyze the code found in the assembly, oh geez, what did we call it? Book API.tests. And we go here, do not bother analyzing code in this assembly, and then I hit save, and what will happen is this section will disappear. Haha! So now we're not testing the code coverage for the tests, because that's kind of pointless. Unless you're testing the tests. Quis custodet ispos custodes, for those of you who speak Latation, or Latian, or whatever it is. That's a Terry Pratchett reference. Quis custodes ispos custodes is who watches the watch. Right, so in order to test this, we need to create a controller. But to create the controller, we need to create this service. Now we can just use new whatever, but the problem is that new is glue. And we don't want that in a test. We want to be able to control this service from within the test. So we'll do that. But in order to do that, we need to mock or create our own version of that data. So in order to do that, we need to go to Manage NuGet Packages, and we need to add a thing called MOQ mock. Add that, please. Do you want to install it in your book API tests? Yes, please. And we're done. Right. So what we need to do is we need to mock the dependencies, then create the controller under test, then call the controller action method, whoops, and then we need to assert on response from action method, or as my brother would say it, because he's a bigger video game fan than I am, action. When that's a reference to Time Crisis. So in tests, I like to do a loop called I like to have 3 stages: arrange, act, and assert. This is not a new thing. This is something that's been around for a very long time. So we're going to say arrange. This is where we do these 2 acts. I'm just going to put these here. Then we do act. That's where we go and do the thing that needs to be done. And so we'll put this here. And then we'll do, whoops. Oh bother, I can't type, honest. Then we do the assert. Arrange, act, assert. I love this loop because it's so simple. Or rather, it's rather trivial. You can break things down quite easily. So first we need to mock the dependency. To be able to do that, we use mock. Mock is great because it takes the core dependency that you have and builds a proxy around it. And that way you can pass the dependency in with the proxy around it, and then inside the proxy you can say, when I call this method on my dependency, actually do this instead of calling the method on the dependency. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But let's just quickly talk through that on here. So when we mock a dependency, apologies for my horrible handwriting. Let's say that this block here is your dependency. Dependency. Right? What you do with MOQ, in this instance I'm going to call it mock because that's how I would pronounce MOQ. What we do is we take the dependency again, it's going to do this, and we wrap it in a mock proxy. That way we can say to the mock proxy, if we have a method on the dependency called get, we can say proxy when I call Git on the dependency, actually do the following. And that way we have full control over what that dependency is actually doing when we call it within that mock. And the reason for that is because we may want some kind of test data, or we need to be in control of the actual data that's coming back and forwards. We'll see that in a moment. So what we need to do is we need to create a mocked iGetBook equals, and this is where we say mock, we want a mock of type iGetBook. Now that's going to complain because we haven't pulled in the references yet, but I'm doing iGetBook because in the controller we pass in an iGetBook. So let's say, yep, that's saying, do you want to reference the API services? Yes, please. And this will say, do you want to reference mock of type T? Excellent. But it's not mock, it's a new mock. There we go. Fantastic. So this mocked iGetBook is now a mock of iGetBook. It allows us to set up that proxy. So we're going to go mocked iGetBook.setup because we're setting something up. Now we don't care what we call this action, because what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a delegate to that action. You may know this as lambdas, right? We're going to go X, we're passing in an expression, lambda, delegate. They're not the same, but they are used interchangeably. So it's a X dot. So this means when I call GetBook, I want you to return default. Now it's going to say default like what? And I'm going to say book. It's like I don't know what book is. Let's pull that in. So the reason for this is because we know ahead of time, because we've already written part of the code. Let me get rid of this. That when we call this and the result comes back as a default, that means we weren't able to find it. We're going to return a not found result. So we're saying no matter what I do going forward, if I call the GetBook method, I want you to return a default instance of that, because I know ahead of time that if it's default, it's going to return not found. So now that we've done that, we then need to create the controller. The controller equals new, what are we? It's a book controller. It's going to be like, hey, I don't have the thing. Now we've created a mock of type thing, which if you're of iGetBook, if you remember, we have this kind of thing. I'm going to use the pen because it's kind of cool to see the little red trail. There we go. So we've got this. This is our iBook. So let's just call this iGetBook. You probably can't read that. I do apologize. In this instance, this one, and then this one. In this instance, the square dependency is iGetBook. In this instance, this big circle with the square dependency in it is the mock iGetBook. Now, in order to be able to pass this into the controller, we need to say iGetBook, right? Pass me the actual object that you are a proxy of. Right? There's some wiring going on under the covers that I don't understand, if I'm honest. I will one day, but not today. The wiring under the covers says that when I pass the object down, keep a reference to this proxy. So although we've set up the proxy methods, we can't do that because that's not the right type. But we can do .object, and the .object gets us the iGetBook. So we now have the controller. Fantastic. We've created the controller and we've mocked the dependencies. Get rid of those. Fantastic. Now what we need to do is we need to get that response. So we say var response equals controller dot get. Is it controller dot get? I believe it is. Let's just F12 on that and make sure. Yeah. So we're going to call this method. We are expecting that the proxy will return a default instance of book, and then that will cause the controller to return a not found result. So that's brilliant. So then what I like to do is I always like to start with the first test that I write for a controller endpoint. I like to start by making sure that the result, we know it's an action result because Ryder is helping us here. But I like to make sure that it is not null. So assert not null response. Because any other tests we do, we're going to throw an exception. It won't actually fail. But let's just check that, right? Let's just check that. We've started writing the test. Let's see it pass. Because it's always good. I'm going to collapse this. It's always good to see a test pass. It's going to run the test. We're going to see what happens. Yeah, look at that. We've got 18% code coverage already. We've done hardly anything. We've done lots of rather... Why can't I resize this? Maybe I got to pull this in. It's not letting me resize these windows. That's a real shame. But why are you not letting me resize them? Highlight code, flatten namespaces, navigate from editor, oh well. We can see that we've got 100% test coverage in the constructor, and we've got 86% test coverage in the actual action, which is wonderful. But that's not what we're here for. We need to make sure that that response is an action, is the not found result. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to convert it. Bar as not found equals response as not found object result. Is it not found object result? What are we returning? Not found result. Okay, let's get rid of that. Result. Now this is a thing called boxing. In .NET you can say I have an object that looks like this, but I want you to pretend that it's one of these. It's not exactly casting, because casting is something that is subtly, it uses casting I think under the covers, but it's subtly different. You may have, I'm sure you've all seen it, there's that wonderful video doing the rounds at the moment of the developer. It's called when a developer watches a QA doing testing, and there's one of those boxes. It's like where's my window? Let me show you. It's a tub with a lid in it, and it's got like a square hole and one of these shapes and a circle and a triangle. And what happens is the person comes along with a cube and drops it in here. Then they come along with a circle and drop it in there. Then they come along with a triangle and drop it in there. And because they all fit that same shape, each of the shapes are smaller than the cube, they all fit in the square hole. That's kind of what we're doing here with .NET. We're saying I have an object which looks like this, or rather, no, let's drop the shape analogy, right? I have an object which implements this interface, right? If you look at oops, I'm in the wrong window. If you look at the GetBook, I can say I have an interface of GetBook, but I want you to pretend that I want you to box it to this, because the flat file book service implements all of the things that GetBook implements. It's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination because we're talking about interfaces, but let's not worry about that too yet. But that's what we're doing here. Take this and pretend that it's one of these. And that's because this controller action here returns an action result. An action result can be not found, okay, bad response, bad request, sorry, internal server, all of these hundreds of millions of things. So it's kind of useful to be able to do this. So then the next thing we want to do, we can't do anything with it if it's null. So assert not null as not found. This is really useful because if it's not a not found, we drop out of the test straight away and it will fail. So if I run that again, it won't fail the test. The test will hopefully pass. There we go. But if I change this to OK object result, so this is saying take that response and pretend that it's an OK object result, what happens is if it cannot be casted, or rather cannot be boxed to that type, then the response of this action is null. Which is what happens here. I don't know whether you can see this because it's quite difficult to see, but it's saying not null exception, assert.null failure at this class in this file here. So what we can do to help that is we can do this response. I think I can do that. Can I do that? Assert not null. Huh. I thought that with not null you could pass in a message. String property name. Nope, okay, fair enough. Not a problem. I thought that you could provide an error message for, like you could say, this thing should do the thing. Oh, you can. Excellent. Nope, you can't. It doesn't like it. Oh well, fair enough. Not found. Not found result. Okay. So yeah, this one has fallen over null at this line because it was unable to convert response to an OK object, which meant that this came out as null. So that's why I do that as a null. That essentially covers that entire controller action path, because all of that is is right there. So if we run this again, we'll still stick at about 86%, but that's fine. I really don't understand why it's not letting me change the... Maybe it's to do with the size of the text? I don't know. Maybe I'd have to close Writer and start it up again, but I don't want to do that just yet. But this should say the actions and the controller names and all that kind of stuff, but there you go. Right, so we'll close that. Right, so we now have, I'm going to rename this actually, rename file to match type name. There we go. So now you can see it says book controller test instead of unit test 1. Really quite useful. I'll run that again. I always like to, whenever I make a change to the code, rerun the tests. Because as you saw then, right? Where is it? If I click here, one of these will tell me how long it took to run it. I'm sure. Fair enough. Okay, right, so we've got a bunch of tests. We've got one test. We need another test for, let's put this after actually. We need another test for the other path. That path that is represented by the 16% of code, right? Oh, interesting. Spotted a bug here. Let me know if you're watching live and you can spot it. Let me know in the chat. I'm just going to take a sip of water whilst I do this. So, if we can find the book, go get the book from the service. If it is default, return not null. Otherwise, go get the book from the service and return it as part of an OK object. So we need to change that. There we go. Actually, no, there is. I was going to say there's a way we can test this to make sure that it doesn't fail, but there isn't. There is, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go public void get returns. Okay. Oh bother! I can't spell honest. Object result. It's because I'm looking down at the keyboard. I'm not the world's best touch typer, but I'm not the world's greatest look at the keyboard and type of person. When requested book can be found. There we go. Same thing again. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste this code. It's almost all the same. We'll refactor this in a moment. So we set that up. We don't return a default book. We want to say a new book. Remember, this is, we won't do things like that just yet. That was me going to step over and make this test a little bit more complex. But we're saying when we call GetBook, just return a brand new one, which is the default one. So what we need to do instead is we need to set a property on that. Otherwise, we'll get the default book back. So let's go title. Nope, is it name? What are the properties? Author, there we go. A-N author. There we go. Tidy this up a little bit. Disabled, doesn't matter. Okay, so what I've done here is previously, if we return new book, that's the same as a default book, because in here, if I can go there and I go to new book, if I go here, we don't have a constructor which does anything. And so if we were to get a new one, these would be set to their default values, which is, if it's a string, it's set to null, which then means that if I do new book, it's the same as doing default book. But I like using default because then if we change the type and we use some new sorry, let me try that again. If we use if we change the type, and regardless of whether we use any sort of new funky C# loveliness, which I'm about to show you in a moment, it doesn't matter because we'll get a compilation error straight away. If I'm saying give me a default book and we've actually changed the type to a default banana, we get build errors instantly. I kind of like that. The new wonderful C# thing I was thinking about is a wonderful thing called Implicit Types. I don't know whether you can see this, right? Targeted new, sorry. So this is saying return a new book and set this property. I can actually do that. Ah, yes, it's showing book in brackets. Return a new thing, and then this book is not what I've typed. This is Ryder trying to be helpful. Return new thing, right? You don't need the book. Book is like a tooltip that I'm storing in there. But I'm going to undo that because just for now, there we go. That's my text. Excuse me. So we're saying return a new book, set a property on it, and run this. Now, this test, because I haven't changed anything else, will fail. Because in the controller, when we return something that's not default, it should return an OK object result. But we're testing for not found result. So I'm expecting a failure here. There we go. So, failure. Why did it fail? Well, it's because the thing that we tested was null. This came out as null because we were testing for a not found result. We actually want OK object result. Okay, so we test that, and then we say var value equals, we need to rename this. Cool little feature inside of ReSharper. You can do this in Visual Studio as well. Double tap Control R as OK object result, and it will change all the other all the other instances of it. Value, and then we do assert not null value. Now I think because that's an object, yeah. So run that. Again, I've made a change. Let's rerun the tests. It takes a couple of seconds to spin them up, but it takes almost no time at all to run them. Now, I'm not actually testing at the moment that the value of it is the correct value. So let's do that as well. var as book equals value as book, assert not null book. I'm not expecting, as book, I'm not expecting this test to pass. I'll explain what I'm doing in a moment, and I'll explain why I don't expect it to pass, but we'll find out. Oh, it did pass. Excellent. Okay, so I was expecting this to fail because I wasn't expecting the value to be able to be immediately mapped to the type book, but that's great. What's great about this is I can then say, let's say var target author. I like to refactor a little bit. A-N author. Because it's pointless checking that the value comes back as a... I'll explain it in a moment. Right, so it's pointless just checking that it's come back as a book. Why don't we assert r equal, not equal, and no, we want target author as book dot author. So what we're doing is we're saying when we originally set this up, we're saying when you return the new book, set the author property to target author, which is this one here. I'm going to change that to const actually because it never changes. Target author. And then when we get the value back after you've checked that it's not null, make sure that this field is set to the right value, because something we're testing that the controller can talk to the service properly, and we're not testing the service, we're testing that the controller doesn't do anything, which is important in a moment when we eventually get around to mapping things. But there we go. We can see now that the book record that we said, hey, service, when I say get me a book, return this exact thing, we can say that the controller did nothing to that and just passed it through, which is a good test. I've just done all of that with my mic muted. I do apologize. Let's start all of that again. I don't know where I managed to mute myself, so let's try it again. So we've got 3 versions of the file there. What we've done is we've said git add this particular file, the launch settings.json. Then we said here is a message for that commit that we're about to do. And it said, hey, I've committed this. You've made 1 file change with 1 insertion within it and 1 deletion within it. So we've got 3 versions of this file. Technically we've got 4, but we'll think about it as 3 because it's easier to sort of grok if you're not familiar with source control. You've got the version of the file that is inside of my IDE on disk. This version here. Sorry, I've got 2 screens. This version here. And then you've got the version inside of Git, which is what we've done here. And then you've got the version that's on GitHub, which is the version. Let me just do this. Bring this back here because we'll need this in a minute. Which is source book API controllers book controller, which is that version of the file. So we've got 3 versions of the file. That way, if my computer, if I start making changes now, it's the launch settings file, but let's just say it's this file for now. If I make changes on my computer, then I know that the change that I make is still protected because it's in that Git source control. But let's push this up to GitHub, and that way we can see it as well. But before we do that, what we need to do is we need to finish off logging our changes. So we'll do git status again. Git status. I'm sitting here worried that the large majority of everything I've just said over the last hour has been muted. If it is, then I'll edit the video for VOD and add some audio that I record at a later date. So what we've done is we've git add. Sometimes I like to add things one at a time, like this. Book controller, git commit -m, give me the message of fixed a very subtle bug with the controller. GetBook controller. And then the last thing we're going to do, git status again. Now I happen to know that when you add files to a solution, we've added the tests, right? We've added these tests. When you add you add a project to a solution, it also edits the solution. So I know all I've done is I've added the unit test. So git add, I'm going to add all of it all at once, because if I commit this without committing this, then the next time if someone was to pull the code and run it on their local machine, they wouldn't be able to see the tests. And if I commit this without including this, they wouldn't be able to open the solution anyway. So we need to add both of these at the same time. So git add, that says bit, git commit message began adding unit tests to unit tests for GetBook controller. Excellent. So that's telling me I've added some files and we're ready to go. So I'm going to go git push. So inside of, let me just straighten out my bandana because it's bugging me that the tear is right here. Because it's distracting me. It makes me feel like my eyebrow is raised, but it's not. So let me just rotate this a little. Again, I'm wearing the bandana only because my head is rather shiny. And I'd rather not be distracting you with the light from above my head. Okay. Oops. Okay. There we go. Okay, so sorry about that. So we want to push this upstream. We want to say take all of the changes we have in this Git repository and push it upstream to our GitHub repository. And what we're going to say is we're going to say origin / Now the remote repository doesn't have this feature branch. So what we need to do is we need to say push it to here. What we would normally do if we were pushing into the main branch we would say origin / main, but we want to say origin. Origin means whatever the server is. In this instance it's github.com / /kaprogman / book API, but in your instance it may be different. So we would normally say origin / main to push it straight into main, which is what if we go back here, which is what this is origin main. This is when we're only committing into the trunk, whereas we want to commit into this feature. So we want to go to the origin and pass it into this feature. So that's what we're going to do. Excuse me, whilst I go back to here, I'm going to go push that. Origin does not appear to be a Git repository. Oh, so what we'll do, we'll just push to origin. You know what? Let's consult the internet again. Git, blah blah blah, branch, commit, check out master hotfix. That's not what we want to do. So we're going to do git push branch. Sometimes, like I said earlier on, sometimes you get the feature branch name. Ah, right, okay. So you can see here, whilst I was talking to you, I was also reading the Google results. Git push u origin and then the branch name, not /. So if I go back to here and I run this one again, what we needed was this apparently. There we go. Excellent stuff. So what I'll do is I'll keep this link around because we've made a change. We'll go back here, go back to the repo. If I refresh, we can see there's a new branch being created. If I click there, we've got this feature GetBook by ID. So if anyone's watching and you're watching live, you can go pull these changes and run them yourself. How fantastic is that? Because we've made some positive progress, I'm going to do something that I wanted to do for a while. So over on Twitter, if you don't follow me on Twitter, then please do. .NET Core Show. I was asking about what I should do to make the streams more interesting. And Carl, I apologize, Carl, I'm going to not intentionally mispronounce your name. So Carl, I'll just say Carl because I don't want to run the risk of mispronouncing people's names. Why don't you learn an instrument? Well, I already know how to play the bass. Oh cool, why don't you play some licks and silliness? Well, guess what? I'll have to set everything up. It's got it working. So, whoops. Let's pull my bass out from under here. And what we'll do is we'll turn this on. Oh yeah, it's working. Anyway, so we are victorious because we've committed this change. I'm just going to move that over there. So in reference to the fact that we've made this wonderful change, I've always wanted to do that. Anyway, let's turn that back down. Hopefully you heard that. If you did and you recognize it, please let me know in the chat above. Just up here. Turn that down. Move the plectrum over here. Anyway, let's go over there. Now then, so we've made these changes. We've made some positive progress. We haven't actually changed anything yet. We've not actually made the change we need to do. So let's double check back over here in our specification. Go check our thing. We need to be able to take a GUID and return the specific book that matches against that GUID. All right. So our requirements are the get API point returns a book record which matches on the supplied GUID. If the request to the get endpoint does not contain a valid GUID, then a 403 needs to be returned. If no data storage we need to not include any data storage technology, and we need to include unit and integration tests if we can. We've already got some unit tests, but we need to get some more things going on. So first thing we need to do is we're going to go and break our unit tests. Now, I am going to say, how are we going to get the ID of the book? Well, we need to go GUID book ID. Now, Ryder's going to complain because I haven't included the using system. But now that I've included it, fantastic. But by simply including that, we've broken the tests. So we've made a change. Let's rerun the tests. The tests aren't going to run because none of them will compile. We've got a message here. There is no argument that corresponds to the required formal parameter book ID when calling this method. which, excuse me, is largely a horrendous compiler message, but it's a lot better than you would get in, say, C or C++. Those compiler messages are traditionally pretty hard to grok. What this means is, yo, I was expecting a GUID, and you didn't provide one, or a GUID, as some of my friends call them. So let's create var target book ID equals GUID dot new GUID, and then we'll go target ID. Excellent. And now we rerun it. The other test will no longer compile. But before we do anything to do with that, so this one's saying exactly the same thing. New GUID target book ID. Excuse me. Ta-da! The tests still pass. Okay, let's git commit and go home. No, this is what's called red green refactor. You make a small change, run the tests, you get red. You get failures. You then green, which is make the test pass again. So do whatever it is you need to do to make the test pass, and then refactor it. And then so we'll get to the refactor in a moment. We've got the test working. We've got the book ID, but what we also need to do is we need to have this interface, GUID book ID. This is not referencing using .system. There we go. But because we've added that to the interface, now this is broken. And it's broken because we're talking to the interface, but there isn't an implementation of the interface, which takes, implementations of GetBook cannot be found because there isn't an implementation which takes that GUID. So what we need to do is we need to go back here and find one inheritor, which is our flat file book service, which is probably named wrong now. Let's call it hard-coded book service. That feels better because it's not using a flat file. This is complaining because although it has a GetBook method, that GetBook method doesn't match the signature of the GetBook method in iGetBook. So if we go back to here, we've told it requires a GUID called book ID. And if we go back to this one, we haven't got one that requires a book ID. So there we go. We're going to go implement that missing file type. And now everyone's happy again, except we're not because we haven't gone back to the controller. We're doing things one thing at a time, right? This controller now needs to take in book ID. Now we're all happy again, except we're not. What's wrong with this one? Seriously, what's wrong? Oh, well, let's build everything and then we'll run the... there we go. Book ID of iGetBook book ID. Aha! Right. So, this is where we're setting up the test. Remember we had the proxy. If I go back to my images again, we've got the dependency here and the proxy. Now, when we say, when I call this method, when I call get on the dependency, actually do the following, we need to say when we call get on the dependency and when, but because get doesn't exist, we need to provide the arguments, right? So in this case, we need to say when we call get and we pass in the target book ID, always return a default. We could actually say arg, I think it's arg.any, no, it.isAny GUID. This means whenever I pass in any GUID whatsoever, always return the default, which is useful for this test because we don't care. But what I like to do is I like to say target book ID because I'm saying when we pass that one in, always make sure that that works because we are assuming that this get method calls that and passes this value into there. So let's make that assumption. And what we need to do here is we need to do the same thing again. Target book ID, rerun the tests, we're passing again. Haha, excellent. Okay, but we haven't satisfied that first requirement yet. We've satisfied this one, half of it. The get API. Oh no, we haven't even satisfied that one. Alter the get method so that it takes a GUID. Excellent. We're taking GUID. I've just realized that I'm streaming to the wrong channel. We're an hour in and I'm streaming to the wrong channel. That's why no one's listening. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. You know what? We're going to cut the intro short there. I did something really horrendously stupid just now. I've just spent over an hour streaming to the wrong channel because I'm a wally. I now have a much better checklist for when I go live. I will grab the video as soon as I can, and I will upload that into YouTube, and it will be a two-parter. Please do ask questions now as I go through what I'm about to go through if you get stuck. I do have a whole bunch of images that I've drawn, and they've come out wonderfully, and it is wonderful. They didn't come out wonderfully. I explained everything that I was doing. All I did was added some tests. So let's just really quickly recap what I did in the last hour streaming to the wrong channel. Future Jimmy, you've got a better checklist now. Do this better. But anyway, hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of a stream that I did earlier on. I did it into the wrong channel. I do apologize. That went out to Waffling Tailors, which is not the channel that this should have gone out to, but that's not a problem. It's not a problem at all. Right, all that we did, if you are able to, go and have a look at the GitHub repository for this project that we're working on. I'm working on this completely in the open. Everyone can commit to it, not a problem. We have a code of conduct, which is over here. I spent some time last night writing all of these out. You can actually, if you look through, you can see that I did this several, less than 12 hours ago, which means that I didn't really sleep very well, but that's because I wasn't sleeping. Anyway, code of conduct. Please, please, please. There we go. Carl, hello. Oh, okay. We did have one viewer. I found that channel. Did message you on Twitter, but I think you are focused on the stream. Right. Okay. Sorry, Carl. I do apologize. I feel like a right wally. I don't know where you're from in the world, Carl, but that's what I feel like. In the UK, we have a phrase wally, a name wally. It kind of means stupid silliness, but there you go. Thank you ever so much, Carl. My goodness, I feel like a real wally. You're in Bristol. Hey, awesome. I don't mean to have sounded like I was talking down to you when I said that. You're just down the road, apparently. Excellent. Okay, right. So, really quick catching up. We do have some documentation that I've thrown together. A really quick specification of what we want. Good morning, Nova Scotia, Canada. Oh my goodness. Hey Shay, how are you doing? How are you doing? Thank you for stopping by. Thank you, Carl, as well, for stopping by. Shay, you missed it earlier on. This, I was just saying earlier on, I was streaming to the wrong channel because when I got off of when I finished the stream for this on Saturday, I then went and did a 2-hour stream of something that my brother and I do on a channel called Waffling Tailors, which is a video game podcast. But I did a 2-hour stream of the PC game Tomb Raider Anniversary. Forgot to change the stream key in OBS, which meant I was streaming there for an hour. But don't worry about it. I'm going to try and catch you up real quick. So what I've gone and done is github.com/gaprogman/book API is the code that we actually wrote together on Saturday, and I've made some really subtle changes in a feature branch, and I explained how feature branching works and that kind of stuff. So to catch you all up real quick, there is a code of conduct, and it's really important to me that I set up a code of conduct just so that I know that everyone is being really nice. Just to answer your question there, Carl, you've said, how do you set up OBS to have multiple targets to stream to? You've got a coding channel and a channel with your kids, so wanted to know how to switch between them easily. I don't know how to switch between them that easily, but what you can do is in the preferences menu under, oh my goodness, I don't think I can get to it now because it's running. File, that's not right. File, settings, haha. So in your so in your stream window here, there'll be the service and the stream key. I just literally have a key vault with all of the keys in them and switch them manually, which is fraught with disaster as you saw earlier on today. There are services you can sign up to that you can stream out to, and they will bounce that out to multiple places all at once. But if that's what you want, then that's you can do that. But then there's a paid element to that. Yeah, so we have a code of conduct, and I'm going to stick to this, and I'm asking that anyone who contributes towards the code didn't want to pay for a restreaming service. I mean, that's perfectly fine. Some people do, some people don't. So what I'll say to you is there is an episode of the .NET Core podcast, the thing that I host, where I talked to Andrew Slevin, or rather his name isn't Andrew Slevin, but he likes to Andrew Morel, and he talks about how they set up the Azure Live Conferences system. They set up the Live Coders Conference using Azure as basically the backbone of it all. I'd give that episode a listen, because there might be some things in there that you might be interested in. They did talk about how they ran a conference, bounced it out to several different suppliers, and brought streams in from different places, and it cost them something like 50 quid to 50 pounds to do it all at once. But anyway, yes, code of conduct. I'm going to be trying to police chat and comments and pull requests and all that kind of stuff to make sure that it falls in line with this kind of thing. If at any time you do get stuck, please do contact me. If you think that someone is being against this, they're being horrible to someone else, or they're being horrible to you, or whatever, do get in contact with me either on .NET Core Show or Podcaster J. That's my personal one. That is the one for the podcast, and I will try and deal with it as fast as I can. In future, I will try to have a moderator on. Usually I would have my brother as a moderator, because he's got access to all of those kinds of things. He's busy today, so he can't do that. Anyway, there is a code of conduct. Please read through it. Everyone so far has been lovely, and the shorthand for the code of conduct is please just be nice. Right? If you're not sure you're being nice, then don't say it. Right? If you're not going to say something nice, don't say it at all. There's a contributions guide. If you are unsure, please ask. This contribution guide has been taken from Clean Architecture. It's like a copy of that one. So I do want to shout out to Ardalis, because Ardalis is great. If you don't know about Ardalis, you should. If you do have a problem and you're not sure, ask either in the chat if we're doing it live, or create an issue and just put it in there. Put it as a bug request, or I'll create one for questions, and that way you can ask a question and we can have a full discussion of it. And then if we need to, we can document it. If we have a discussion in the chat, I'll get your permission to create an issue. Then I'll create an issue based on the discussion we had, and put it. It's difficult doing things backwards, isn't it? Put it over there. Right. Okay. So what I've done so far is I've created a second branch. This is a feature branch, and all that I've done in here, I'm working on it locally. All I've done in here is I've added a tests project, and then I've added two tests. I've added a when we can't find a book, return not found, and when we can find a book, return okay. So let's just go back to main here, and then I can minimize this. There we go. Okay. So it's a little bit complex how we're doing it. So sorry about that. I know exactly what I did there. I have my microphone mute set to Control M, and inside of Writer, if you do Control M, Control O, it collapses everything. I do it by habit, so I'll try to stop that. It's all going really swimmingly today, but you iterate towards better stream quality. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, so because I'm writing these two tests after writing the code, it's development-driven testing, but I'm going to be doing test-driven development, or maybe if I get around to it, behavior-driven development, as and when we get onto it. So what I've done is I've written two tests for these. I know in the book controller that if we can't find a book, we return default, and then we should return a not found. So that's what this test is doing. There's a lot going on, but that's what this test is doing. But if we can find the book, we will return the actual book in an OK object result, which is what this second test is doing. Now, all I've done so far is I've added this GUID as part of our specification over here. Is it the specification? This one here. Alter the get method. Let's zoom in a little bit. Excuse me. Let's zoom in a little bit because then that's easier to read. Alter the get method so that it takes a GUID, which is what I've done. But then that broke all the tests, so I went and fixed the tests. The supplied GUID should be used in the service which implements GetBook interface. And that's what I did. So it's being used here. It's not being used to do anything useful here, but it is being used there. Let's go back over here. The book record which matches against the supplied ID should be returned by that get method. Okay, so what we need to do, because this is a hard-coded list, we're not actually returning anything. We're just returning that standard one. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say private read only. I'm going to say a list of, we're going to say book fake database. There we go. We're going to pull that in, and the reason I'm doing this is because we don't want to hit that database yet. We don't want to create a database because that will then infer how we build the rest of the application. So we're going to say fake database equals, so it's marked as read only, which means I can only edit it inside of the constructor, and this is the constructor here. Fake database equals new list of book, and we're going to say in there we want a new book. Now I am going to say author equals an author because I want it to be horrendously generic, and I'm going to say title. No, it's not title, it was name, wasn't it? Yep. We need to change that, but we'll change that in a moment. And we've got some demo data in our spec, so let's take a look at that. An author, we're calling it Lorem Ipsum the Revenge, or rather Lorem Ipsum the Revenge. I think those are the only two fields in the book type. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to say public, oh my goodness, I can't type, honest, public GUID ID. And we've got Ryder saying, what in the heck is a GUID? We're saying, well, it's a system.GUID, so we need to pull in system. Fantastic. Just put a little space there. And then we're going to say GUID. Nope, it's not called GUID. ID equals, and then what I'm going to do is, usually I would do like new GUID, but we need to be able to access by this ID. So luckily, inside of Ryder, generate a GUID, that GUID please, equals that. Is that going to work? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do GUID.parse like that. There we go. That's that happy. And then we'll create another one. And we'll go tools, generate GUID as a string please. Put that here. Some other, we'll do it as a hyphen, why not? Some other author. Returns. There we go. So let's get rid of those brackets. We can make this simpler by doing an implicit new, but let's not worry. So what we have here is when we create a new instance of the hard-coded book service, which previously was called flat file service, I've renamed it because it makes more sense. When we create a new one, we call into this method here, which sets up this list for us, this fake database. Now, currently, our GetBook method is just returning a new one. But what we need to do is we need to go fake database dot first or default. Now first or default because we want to return either the one that matches or a default instance. This is really quite useful for, I'll explain what we're doing in a moment. Book.id equals book ID. Right, there we go. So what this is doing, we can actually simplify this and make this into an arrow function, but that simplifying it makes it harder to read. I would prefer it to be a little bit easier to read. So we take in this book ID and we say go into the fake database, which is our list, and find me the first one which matches on this predicate. We're saying every single book in that list, pretend it's called book, right? And work through them one at a time until you find the one where its ID matches the book ID we've just been passed in. I'm going to rename this to target book ID, not IT ID. There we go. Yeah, okay. Now it's a little bit easier to read. You're not got like book ID and book.id, right? And if it can't find, if there are no items in the list, what will happen? Start again. Go into the fake database and get me the very first item which matches this, where its ID is equal to the target book ID. If you can't find one, return me a default instance of whatever the list item is. So in this case, the list is a list of books. Let's do that. Am I live now? I mean, it'll take 20 seconds for it to... There we go. Right. I don't know why, but my stream dropped and came back. I'm guessing that my internet connection is not that stable, but who can say? Who can say? I'm not sure where we got up to. Oh yes, we were talking about dependencies. I was talking about dependencies. So let me just talk through this code, right? I've changed this... Wrong window. I've changed the service code so that it returns a matching item, right? I have video but no audio. Oh my goodness. How about that? Hopefully, do you need to unmute inside of Twitch? This is not going well today, is it? My goodness, let me this is not going well for me today. Do you need to unmute the Twitch stream? I don't know what's going on. It definitely says that it's... Oh, okay. So Shay thinks that it's you. Shay, I will say to you that the stream stopping was not you. I think it was me. I think I must have... My internet connection isn't 100% stable. It dips every now and again. So maybe I found a period of time when it dips. This is going to be like an 8-part video. Oh well. Oh well. Okay. So we changed the service so that it returns the first or default which matches on this ID. And then because of that, none of the tests had to change to make it work. But it isn't actually testing what we think it's testing. This is why it's always good to not just run the tests, but then reevaluate. That's why it's red, green, refactor. So we've refactored to add the ability to actually make this test work. We've run the test, they come back green. I turned on another laptop on my blue headset. Oh, okay, fair enough. Please don't worry, Shay. That's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. Okay, fair enough. That's not a problem. I have the same thing with these. I have my phone, my laptop, and my desktop all set up, connected to these. And as soon as one device comes on, it just jumps across. It's good, but also bad. But there you go. Right, okay. So the not found test will still pass and still make sense. The OK object result test still passes, but no longer makes sense. And let me tell you why. Right? I'm going to run the tests again. And I still don't understand why it's doing that. You know what? I don't care. I'll just do that for now. I'm not bothered about the dot coverage window just yet. Okay. So the reason that this one passes, but it's not actually a good test, is because we're saying, here's my target GUID. Here's my author name. When I call it with this target GUID, always return it with that author name. I'm going to turn this into an integration test. I don't like to have all of them in one place, but let's just temporarily an integration test. So we're actually going to talk to the... No, we won't. What I'll do is I will say ID equals target book ID. I'm talking nonsense. When we get around to using a real data store, we'll use as book, add book as book ID. Okay, so when we get around to using a real database, we'll add an integration test, but we're not using a real database yet. So we'll just do it like this for now. So what we're doing is we're saying when we pass in this ID, I want you to return a new book with that author name and with the ID set. That way we can test whether it's actually going to work or not. And then we go, hey, go do this, get all of the things, check that the author is matching, and now also check that the ID is matching. We haven't really changed anything yet, so that should still work. Yeah, okay. What we will do another time is we'll actually build some integration tests in where we say, hey, spin up an HTTP client and put an HTTP request in and check the response. And that way we're not faking anything. We're actually talking to the real controller, which talks to the real service, which then tests that. But we're not going to do that just yet. It's really... No? I don't understand why that... Do you know what? I'm not going to get caught up in that. So, in the one of the other streams I've just done, we made some changes and committed it in. And we've hit a point where, let's take a look at the controller again. So if it's not found, we also need to then check what happens if we don't pass a valid GUID in. Let's run it and find out. I don't like to manually run to test things, but let's run it and find out. I think what's going to happen is, so this is Swagger. I think what's going to happen is when we try it out, it's going to say, hey, you need to give us a GUID. So let's just do two tests. I'm going to do two tests. I want to do a manual integration test, and I want to say, get me this one, please. Where are we? Over here. Get me this one, please. And this has come back with Lorem Ipsum Revenge by AN author, which is what we would have expected. Fantastic. So let's go back here and let's do something that is not a GUID. That doesn't look like a GUID. It's not letting me do that now. Excellent. That's good. So that's some JavaScript side stuff inside of Swagger that's stopping me from doing it. Problem is that we're not actually protecting against a bad GUID. Right? In the code we're not protecting. We're relying on the front end to do that for us. Whereas actually what we want to do is we want to make sure that the system does that for us. There's two ways to do this. We can do this the long way, which is we add an if inside of the controller, and the second way is to add an attribute. But for now we'll just do the if. If no, actually, what am I talking about? We're doing test-driven development. Let's test drive it. Okay. So what we want to do is we're going to take this and we're going to copy it and do this. Right. We want to say, instead of a new GUID, GUID.empty, whoops, empty, there we go. So that gives us a GUID which is all zeros. And you should never ever get a GUID which is all zeros because that's an empty GUID. Get returns bad request when requested ID is not a GUID. Okay. So it doesn't really matter. We don't need to do the setup because we know it's never going to get to that. So we don't need to do the setup. What we're expecting is we pass a GUID empty. This should, we don't care about the service. Doesn't matter because we're not going to hit the service. We don't want it to hit the service. We then say call that, and what we want is this to be a bad request result. Rename this as bad request. Okay, I'm going to run this and the test is going to fail. But that's good. We've got the red. We've got red, green, refactor. So let me just explain that a little bit. Hopefully it makes sense anyway. So I'm using red, green, refactor. I'm also using something called test and commit or revert. really that should be like this. Red green refactor is so red is write a test. Whoops, that should be a space. Write a test or make a change. Then run the tests. Okay, so you write a test or make a change and then run all the tests again, or rather run all of the ones that are feasible to run. The green is fix any broken tests or compilation issues. Right? And you continue in this loop until you get to the point where all of your tests go green or they all pass. And then refactor is revisit new code. No, not new code. Affected code. Haha. And refactor where necessary. I always misspell necessary, so I apologize, everyone. So red green refactor, write a test or make a change, run all the tests, and keep going round and round in circles until you've written just enough code to pass all of the tests. You made just enough changes, and then get to the point where you're happy to refactor. If something needs changing, if something needs tidying up. And then the other one, test and commit or revert, is you make your changes, you test it, and if the tests pass, that could be unit tests, manual tests, automated tests, hopefully a combination of all the different types of tests. If they all pass, you then commit, or you go back a step and attempt to take on the problem again a second time, because it could be that you don't want to be spending hours and hours writing hundreds of lines of code and then run the tests and nothing works because that's no good. So you write the bare minimum. When all of your tests pass, you immediately commit. You're not pushing anything, you're just committing. There's a difference between committing a change to source control and pushing it to the sort of parent repository. And you just commit. And then when you're ready, you push all of those changes, or maybe you squash and then you push. There's a difference between those things. Anyway, right. So we've broken this test. Can I? Oh, I'm interacting with the wrong window again. So let me just stop that as well. So why did this fail? Book API controller test. Oh yes, right. So this is failing because we've done the red. We need to do the green. All we need to do is set it up so that when we pass in an empty GUID, which is not necessarily possible, but there you go, an empty GUID, we get a bad request back. So all we do is we go if book ID equal book ID, there we go, equals GUID.empty, GUID.empty, oh, bother. Then we do return new bad request result. Rerun the tests, and they're currently red. They were about to go green. Look at that. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got red, green, refactor. We've got red and green. Do we need to refactor? Let's have a look at this. Is there anything we could refactor this to make it a lot more complex? But I'm okay with it as it is. So that's okay, and I'm okay with doing the equals. I prefer to do it equals because then it short circuits. If we reverse this, if we did book ID is not equal to GUID.empty, right? And then we end up doing this, and then we end up doing this. Let me just, yeah, it's already done that for us, right? The problem with this is we've got nested ifs, right? there's nothing wrong with that. It will still work. But if you do it the other way, if I just comment that out and uncomment this one, if you do it this way, it's a little easier for you to sort of grok. You're doing it one step at a time. If it's equal to, if the ID is empty, then return. Just stop. Just short circuit everything. Doesn't have to do anything else. Go get me the book. If it comes back default, short circuit and just return. Otherwise, return the book. Now the difference is that with this one, you would have to say, if it's not empty, then go get me the book. And if it is default, return. You can't short circuit that. But if it's not default, then return. But if it is, then eventually you're climbing down this tree. You're building this tree, right? This is better, or rather, in my opinion. I'm sorry. Let me put it that way. I hate to gatekeep and tell everyone you need to do it this way. This is not better. It's just I find it easier to read and grok because you're breaking it down into 3 more trivial steps. And things like ReSharper and Rider and Visual Studio and the C# compiler will actually agree with you, because then the C# compiler, the JIT runtime, the .NET runtime is doing less work to actually do this if you have this sort of if statement rather than the sort of nested statements. It makes it easier to run. But there you go. So we've done this. We've passed those tests. I think. Yep. Okay, we'll do one more test. And we'll do like a manual test. We'll run this again. Let's just get rid of all of these. Okay, and then we'll do some more general refactoring. So if I put nonsense into here, which doesn't match, we get nothing. If I generate an empty GUID, I wonder if I can do that. Tests, nope. Tools, generate GUID. Nope. Okay, so we'll not worry about that one. But if I pass in a real GUID, one that exists within the hard-coded book service, we won't do that one because we did that last time. Well, some other author, lorem ipsum, returns. Oops. This one. Haha! Right, okay. So we've got that back. So what if we take this? So this is what I really like about Swagger, right? It's showing you if you want to run it in color, you can do it like that. Or you can run it inside of your browser because it's a GET request. This is what you can do. So if I do that, I get that back. Firefox is really useful in that it's highlighted all of that for me. If I do GetBook, immediately bad request, which is wonderful. If I then go back and do that, 404. Oh, 400, even better, because what's happened is this value is not a GUID. And what's great about that is .NET Core, or rather ASP.NET Core, has done that for me. It's figured all of that out for me. I haven't had to do anything. Wonderful. I love not having to do anything, because that means it's easier for me to get the work done. So the other thing that we need to do 2 more things, but let's check this code in first. Where are we? So we'll do git status. I did say in the first part that you would have missed Shay because it was streamed to the wrong channel, but I'll try and combine all the videos together. I did say that I like to use the git command line, but I also, when I get stuck, I drop out to a visual app to help me figure out why I'm stuck. I've also said that it is worth using whatever you are productive with, rather than saying, oh, well, you have to use the API, or you have to use this, you have to use that, because then you fall, if somebody says to you, you have to use this because you, or if they say, you are not a real, it's done. Oh, that's even better. Oh, that's even better. I really like that. You was about to suggest GUID.trypars instead of explicitly checking for an empty GUID, but didn't realize the .NET Core wired up for non-valid GUIDs. Indeed, it does. And if you have we'll get onto it later because we need to pass in. It won't be in this stream. It'll be in another stream. There is an endpoint which will take in. If we scroll down the all of this, blah 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 blah, the put. When we're updating, we need to take in a GUID. we will in the future write a custom attribute to test that that value is a GUID, and we'll short circuit all of that validation if we want to, which is really quite useful. But yes, you're absolutely right. .NET Core will do all of this for you, which is as long as you tell it, it will do it all for you, which is wonderful. But where was I? Oh yes, yeah. So if anybody ever says to you, "You're not a real in unless you," oh sorry, I've just said Shay. It was Carl that said that. I'm sorry. It's because you see, I'm not very good at your messages are both turning up with the same, almost the same shade of orange. So I apologize for that. I'm not very good at noticing differences with colors and text. So that's why I like to have lots of bright colors everywhere, because it's but anyway, I'm getting distracted by myself. I apologize to everyone and thank you ever so much. Right. So I was saying earlier on that, and the same username like this. Well, exactly. Either way, you are both awesome. Just take that, right? I think that you're both awesome. Yeah, if anyone ever says to you, "You are not a real unless you are not a real X unless you Y," then all they are doing is gatekeeping. Don't let anyone gatekeep. If you are more productive using an application that has a user interface, a graphical user interface, then use that. If you are more productive using a TUI instead of a GUI, a TUI, a text user interface, then use that. If you are faster at writing things down, then do that. If you're faster at typing things, then do that. Do whatever it is that helps you to get the job done. There's no gatekeeping here. I don't want to gatekeep anyone. I want to say, look, if you feel better doing that, then you've got to do that. I feel a little bit better most of the time using the Git CLI, the Git command line interface, the Git text user interface, just because I feel a little bit more confident with it. I do get stuck, and when I get stuck, I drop out to a Git user interface client, just because then it's easier for me to figure out what have I done wrong, how do I get out of this. But I will, from time to time, go to Google and say, "Hey Google," or "Hey Bing," or "Hey whatever, hey DuckDuckGo, I'm using Git and I'm stuck and I need to do this," like Git branch, Git whatever, and I will learn that way, because we're not all going to remember it. You can use the manual, you can use the help system, but hey, anyway. So we've used Git status to see what we've done, and we've done some things. What did we do to the model? Git diff source book API models books. What did I do? Oh, right, okay. So I've added the ID. You see, I'm trying to switch over from Git extensions GUI on Windows to CLI, because 90% of what you're doing, I find in the CLI much faster. And that's perfectly fine, Carl. If you are better at using the CLI, then use the CLI. If you feel like if you feel like it's faster to use a CLI, then totally do that. Because what you'll find is that the majority of the GUIs that you're using are just calling the CLI anyway. So all you're doing is, if you want to, you're just removing that one layer of abstraction. But that layer of abstraction may help. So it may be worth just keeping it around anyway. So I've just done a diff. I can see that I've added 2 lines, not a problem. Okay, so usually what I would do is I would do these. Sometimes I will commit them one at a time. I'll add them into source control one at a time. But I'm happy with all of these changes. So git add everything. Git commit. Need to make sure I don't push control when I push M there. Added support for requesting a book by its ID. Excellent. So it says here, look, you've added a bunch of stuff, but also you've deleted this file and created that file. And that's just because I've renamed this one to this one. Not a problem. We're gonna go git, we're gonna go push. I'm gonna push upstream to the origin, but I want to use the feature. What was the feature? Feature Git book by, can I? Yeah, look at that. Tab completion. I love it. Get book by ID. All I did was I started typing it. I wonder if I'll do it for the whole thing. Yeah, okay, right. So that's a great feature of the CLI. If you don't want to type it all out, you can go FEA, start typing it, and then you hit the tab key, tab completion. If there's more than one, that it will guess, and you can keep hitting tab and it will continue to guess. So I'm going to push that up. Fantastic. Excellent. So then if I go to the main repo again, we've got 2 branches. We've got Git is 4 commits ahead of the main branch, and that's where we've just pushed those changes to. Excellent. So let's come back here. Right. So what I want to do is I'm almost finished. I want to actually double check that there's nothing else I need to do to the code base. So this is one of the things that I like to do. There's a thing in one of the Bob Martin books where he talks about be a little bit like the Boy Scouts. Use the Boy Scout rule of leave the campsite a little bit better or a little bit cleaner than it was when you got there. And so I'm going to do that and make this a little bit cleaner. I'm going to do a little bit of refactoring if I can. So let's have a look here. We've got some warnings here, some errors, some warnings. Here we go. This is what's useful about Rider. It will tell you all of these things, right? So let's have a look. So it's saying, oh, I've got some unused. Look at all these unused usings. Okay, get rid of them. Excellent. Save. We've got 7 more. Okay, more unused usings, I reckon. Let's take a look. Yep, unused usings. Remove them. Excellent. One more. What's this? Oh, right. Yep. So this one is saying it's called fake database without an underscore. You should give it fake database with an underscore, because then it will fit the C# standards a little better. Okay, done. I'm going to build. And I like to watch the output of the build, because I like to see if there's any errors there as well. Errors or warnings. What I sometimes do on my local machine is I set up errors as warnings, and then I just will not build. But that doesn't get you anywhere when you're trying to make something new if there's already warnings in the system. So what I'll do is I will go over here. I'll go to git status. We can see that we've made those changes. I'm going to do git add all of them because I'm fine with it. Oh, cool. Git. I did not know you could do this. Let's try it. Git commit all with the message removed unused using statements. Let's see what happens. I'm expecting this. So what I'm expecting this to do is to git commit all of the files. That's what I'm guessing -a does, because it's saying that you can use git add or git add commit git add or git commit a. And I know that -m means add a message, so let's see what happens. Hey! And then we're going to rerun that one. It's pointless me typing it all out again, so let's just hit that button. Haha! Excellent! Excellent! So then if I come back to here and do that refresh, we can now see that it is now 5 pushes ahead. Now, why don't I do one last thing and get this into main, right? Let's compare it. I can create a pull request from the command line, but I don't know how to do that. We are able to merge. We don't want to merge, we want to create a pull request. So, pull request, new pull request. I'm going to go from feature book ID. Yep, we're able to merge. Excellent. This is just showing me the changes that I've made. Fantastic. Those are wonderful. What's this? Oh, no, that's fine. That's because the file was deleted. So, blah, 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 blah. Excellent. Those are the changes to be made. So I am comparing those changes. Excellent. So how do I... Branches can be automatically merged. I don't want to automatically merge them. I want to create a pull request. Choose 2 branches, see what's... But I want a pull request. Choose 2 branches, discuss the changes. Okay. That one. Why wouldn't you let me create a pull request? This is a bit silly. Okay. We'll do it this way then. Maybe it's related to the security that I've set up on the able to merge. Can be merged manually. You know what? I bet it's related to the security I've set up. Oh well. Yep, able to merge. Merge these branches. Do you know what? Let's just merge them. Let's just merge them. Git checkout main. Your branch is up to date with main. Git pull. Oh yes, because I haven't set that up. But that's fine. Git fetch. just to make sure I've got all of the, and then do git pull. It's complaining here because what I've done is I've decided deliberately to wait until I have to rebase or fast forward when I'm pulling the latest thing. So I am currently looking at the main branch, but if I git checkout feature get by ID, excellent, and I want to merge feature by ID into main, it wants me to do a pull request though. Oh well, let's do git one last time to make sure that's up to date. I always like to switch to each branch and pull to make sure they work. So git checkout main, git merge. Now let's make sure of this up. Are you using a brown switch? I'm not. I'm using red switches. I had to look at the keyboard box to remember. So Bfilan, is that right? Bfian? I'm not sure, but thank you for asking the question, Bfian, and thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm using red switches, and they're actually in a Keychron K8. Let's have a look. Does it say on the back? It doesn't say on the back. Usually they would say. I would expect them to be like a sticker somewhere. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding how merge works. So let's, yes. So, you know what, let's just quit out of that. Let's do, so I want to make sure that I understand that if I do git merge with this, so if I do git merge feature request, that's going to pull feature request into the main branch. Your branch is ahead. Okay, so git commit. I would prefer to do this inside of the GitHub user interface, but oh well, we're here now. So I'm going to say what's great about GitHub is you can say there fixes issue number 1 by adding a controller which returns a book via its ID. So this one was right there, and then I can do git push upstream origin main. Oh, of course, main. The forward slash there was wrong. I'm pushing to the origin, and I'm pushing to the branch called main. So if I then go back here, oh bother. Now let's have a look. There should only be, that's a shame. I think I couldn't create a pull request inside of the UI because I'm not logged in as me, and that's probably why. But I've just merged everything in, haven't I? I'm in main. My last commit was yep. Oh well. Next time I will do it better. The idea is that we're going to iterate towards better, right? Oh my goodness. Right, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, whoops, that. So then in here, 1 second, folks. Hello again. Let me get to the correct window. Right. Okay. So what I went and did, because I wasn't logged in when I did it, I'm in a completely different browser. I wasn't able to create the pull request. Now the problem is that the branches now match. So I can't, there we go. New pull request. Excellent. There isn't anything to compare. Well, that's useless. Oh well. What I shall do is I shall go over here. Incorrectly merged changes from the feature get by ID. Oops. Branch into main. This issue was fixed with commit. Something like that. Maybe I can just do this. Let's preview that. Yeah, look at that. Excellent. So we'll close with comment. Ta-da! Excellent. That's our first piece of work done. We've just committed another thing that is wonderful. So let's go and do another hurrah. So this is, again, let me explain. This is based on a tweet that I'm not sure, Carl, whether you are the same Carl, but previously I had said, hey, I'm looking at maybe putting some music, or is there a point of putting some music behind my streams? Just need to find my plectrum now. I think I've dropped it. Yes, I have. I'll have to play it with my fingers, which won't be as loud, but that's fine. And I'd said, hey, what should I do? Should I put some music behind it? And Carl on Twitter had said, hey, if you're learning an instrument, why not play the instrument? I'd then said, hey, I figured out how to get it connected through my DAW, DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, into my computer. So let's do this. We've just finished something off. All I'm doing is I seem to be buying time. But you know what? I've got a whole packet of plectrums here. The only reason I'm going to play with a pick is because I'm a little cleaner when I play with a pick. I'm not going to be playing some... No, that's too soft. Goodness. There we go. Right. So, we've just completed something. We need a victory tune. It's a bit kitschy, but I love it. I told my brother that I'd learned that last night. And he said to me, good God, why? And I said, because it's fun. But yes, so we've gone and committed that. The one thing that I want to do before we do anything else, though, is I want to, if we can, set it up so that when we commit some code, it will automatically run those tests. Because there's a wonderful thing that GitHub provides called GitHub Actions. Right? If I refresh that, that's now closed. Excellent. GitHub provides a wonderful thing called Actions, and that means that you can do something every time somebody commits something, which is what the GitHub Actions are for. Now, I have in the past, let's do this in the other browser. I bet I've closed it, haven't I? Oh, bother. Give me a moment, folks. Keep closing the wrong windows, you see. Let me drag this over here. Right. So I have in the past. You can tell when I'm logged in and when I'm not logged in. When I'm logged in, it shows me the dark theme. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Right. Okay. So what Actions is it allows you to build or provide some kind of action-y thing that happens when you commit, right? Which is great. So what we're going to do is we're going to say whenever we are pushing to main or we have a pull request to main that we want to run on the latest Ubuntu. This is just literally, I've clicked a button, right? Let me just go back a few steps, right? What I went to the Actions tab and I clicked set up this workflow because it's realized, hey, this is C#. It's probably .NET or .NET Desktop. Let's do .NET. Remember, .NET Core has been renamed to .NET, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to say on main, either as a push or a pull request. We're going to run it inside of an Ubuntu container because that's how these work. Behind the scenes, it's just a container. We're going to pull the code. We're then going to set up .NET. Now, set up .NET takes a little bit of time. I do want to figure out which argument it is to actually make that faster, because there's like a, hey, we're going to use telemetry and we're going to set this up, and it's a bit annoying, but there you go. We do a build with no restore, we do a test with no build, and that will do it. So then if I do this, added GitHub Action for building or testing whenever changes are committed. .net. Whenever changes are committed either to main or pulled into main, a build and test will be run. Go. Ta-da! So now whenever we commit anything to main, it will always run that test. So what we've got to do to test that, because it's not going to, is it going to run it? Yes, it is. Check this out. Oh yeah. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll look at it in the other view. Can we see it in the other view? Yeah, okay. So what I really like about this is anyone who commits to this now will immediately run this test. I can then set it up so that if the tests don't pass, it doesn't do anything else. It needs to build in order to test, but that's fine. What does the GitHub action actually read like? I didn't actually read it fully. Workflows.net. So these exist in the .github folder, inside of the workflows folder, inside of whatever.yaml. And it is just YAML. I could have typed all this out, but hey, I'm faster clicking buttons, so let's just click buttons. So it does a .NET test. So it's just going to test on every single CS project that it can find. Sorry, I lost my words for a second there. Oh, bother, I've lost my window now. Oh yeah, look at this. It worked. All of the tests pass. Can I see the logs? I can't see the logs, but that's fine. Oh, we do have a warning. Oh, and that's because Ubuntu will soon be upgraded. That's not a problem. That's not my warning. That's not a huge problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a status badge. This is really cool. Passing. So we're going to go copy that. And then in here, I'm going to go git pull. And it'll be like, oh, you've not told me about this thing. And then I'm going to pull down the YAML file. Then we go back to Rider. I'm going to go into the README. Oh, that's lovely. Glitchy. I think Rider just crashed. No, it didn't. Okay, let's close that. It automatically opened the README file. Fantastic. Let's add an existing file. Nope. Maybe I can add it here. Add an existing file. Can I not add an existing item? There we go. It probably appeared last time, but there you go. Let's add that there. Cancel. Well, where is it? It said it was there. No, don't expand everything out. Add existing folder. Do you know what? Let's just add it into the documentation file. It's fine. README. Do you want to move it, or do you want to add a link? Let's just add a link. Excellent. And then within here we can say edit, build status. Hey, okay. And then when I go here, I can go git add readme git commit added build status badge to readme. Then we do git push origin main. Be like, oh, I don't know what this is going to do. Well, guess what? You do know what it's going to do, because look at that. Yes. And then if we go to the action, it will then be rerunning. And what happens is, if this next build action fails, this will change to failing. Pretty simple, huh? And that way we know ahead of time, as soon as we load this README in a browser that can support it, Markdown, we know immediately whether it is running or failing. Pretty cool, huh? I think think that's all we set out to do. Oh no, we need to update the README. What a wally. Right, okay. We also need to say that is done. And we need to strike through that. I like to strike through things just so that we can see that it is done. Let's do the preview. Does that strike through it? No, it doesn't. It's the double tilde. How do you... Do you know what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What gets me to this working is that I git add readme. Oh well, git commit updated roadmap, and then we'll go push. And what will happen is, because we've already kicked off a build, it will kick off another one, but it actually queues them. And so if this was still running, it would have run another one, or rather it would have queued another one, because this is set up to only do one at a time. Please feel free to go have a look at the code, to pull the code, to have a look at the repo. I'm going to be adding new issues. What I'm going to do is, every time I finish one, I'm going to add another one, and then at least there's two to choose from next time. And I am automatically assigning them to myself, but if you feel like you want to take a crack at it and do it properly, like what I did with that pull request, then please feel free. This one, I would rather do this one on stream, because this is a little bit more complex, because it involves paging. Paging is kind of, it's not trivial to do, so I'd rather talk through that as I'm doing it. But if you want to propose a solution and submit a pull request, please feel free. But like I say, I'm going to be trying this one on stream tomorrow at what should be the right time, 11 AM on twitch.tv/GitBook, if I leave the stream keys as it is on this page. So please, look at that, there I am. So please feel free to, whatever it is you do on Twitch, you follow, subscribe, whatever it is. If you don't want to, that's also fine. I don't mind. I have no way of seeing on screen. So to explain something real quick, where's my terminal? There it is. Let's just get rid of this. I am actually running a Linux distribution, so I don't have access to Streamlabs and things like that. So I don't have all the cool features, like it'll go to let me know if someone's followed. So if someone has been following whilst you've been watching this or the previous one that was broken, then thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much, everyone in the chat, for your questions and comments. I wish you all a wonderful continuation of your day. Have a lovely day, everyone. Bye bye.